I found that a lot of girls behave like that. Girls, they have this thing where they kind of want to do things like, well, they're scared of making mistakes. They want to be more perfectionist, all this stuff. They're a lot more sensible. They're a lot more mature. They're better at school and behaving and all this kind of stuff. That's like the natural tendency of these people. With boys, it's actually very different. The nature of boys generally is very different to girls. And I think what it is that there's a lot of stuff nowadays where we want the boys to kind of behave like the girls, but the problem is that they're different. They're very, very different. And there's a really good book on this, by the way. It's called Raising Boys. If you Google it, you'll see it. This guy he's wrote about raising boys. So what I'm saying is that fundamentally, I have a very similar situation where my daughter's like the way you described. My son is like a typical boy, and I think that we have to realize is the difference between the two, first of all. And I don't think that the boys can be like the girls and the girls can be like the boys and all that kind of stuff. Of course, we want all the children to listen, to behave, to do all those kind of things. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying that the nature of them is different. Also, what I would say is that the way schools are today, I think that they're kind of made for girls in that sense, right? Because boys don't want to sit still. Boys don't want to listen. Boys want to go out, do stuff, play this, that, and the other. And the way the schooling system works is like, no, if you're one of those boys who's just like very active and very like wants to do different things, unfortunately, you're not going to do very well at school. Because school has these rules, you have to fulfill the rules. If you don't fulfill the rules, you're seen as someone who's an outcast and all these kind of things. Yeah, the medication, it plays a big role. So definitely that's one of the elements in it. So maybe you could kind of like get that reviewed. I think with the autism thing, I would just be careful because I looked into the process of autism and the way they diagnose it. It's actually a very complex process. For example, they would get like a speech and language therapist to analyze the child. Then they would get a psychiatrist. They would do all these kind of things. A lot of the time, schools have just kind of got simple checklists. They're looking at it and they're going, no, he's not. I would just be careful of that. About like just taking the school's judgment, because they might have just observed him in a lesson or two. These are not the way. Like, I looked into this properly and they said to me that you cannot diagnose it unless they have sessions with speech and language therapists, unless they actually speak to psychologists, and they have a proper process for doing this. And I know the way schools are, they might just look at special needs and all these kind of things. But fundamentally, that's one thing to keep in mind. With a lot of boys, I've seen a lot of boys raised in our families and all these kind of things. As the years go on, they become much better, okay? So I've seen some kids who are like, when you saw them, you would think these guys are like terrible, like boys, or like they're like doing stuff which is crazy, right? But now I see these kids, like when they're all grown up, they're like, 10 years old, they became much easier, much better. 12 years old, they're better. Like, they're going to grow and they're going to mature and they're going to change in different ways. So some of this is just like patience and riding it out, right? There's definitely an element of that. But then there's other things which I think practically you can do. So for example, there's a book called Calmer, Easier, Happier Parenting. Calmer, Easier, Happier Parenting. And this is how a lot of boys are at that age. And so they're giving lots of things. So for example, like one of the techniques they said is about preparing the child. So for example, let's say the child is on the iPad, right? Rather than taking the iPad off and saying, your time's finished, taking the iPad, like just by you telling the child 10 minutes before that, listen, in 10 minutes, your time is up for the iPad. I'm going to come and get it from you in 10 minutes. And then they hear that. And then you come after 10 minutes and take it. It's very different than taking it at 10 minutes. Like taking it immediately would cause a tantrum and big issues and problems and all that kind of stuff. But just doing that one technique, it would make things easier. Same with like getting dressed in the morning for the kid, for the things. One of the things they were saying in the book is that you get the child to pick out the clothes they want to wear the next day, so that the clothes are already laid out the next day before school. So when they wake up, that then makes it easier. So a lot of the strategies in the book were all about like techniques and practical things you can do to actually alter the behavior of the child. So I think that you do need to get into some of this stuff. Maybe you can go to ChatGPT and say, give me a summary of calmer, easier, happier parenting, or give me a summary of raising boys. What are the main tips and tricks and things like that? And just extract those things and kind of do that. When you remove screens from the children, when there's 0 screens, the children alter their behavior massively. Now, of course, there's like massive pain in the first day, 2 days, 3 days, 4 days of doing that. But after a while, it disappears. I remember when I moved from this house where I live with my family, because we had like loads of TVs and my parents watched TV and stuff. And we moved to my house where it was just me and my wife and my kids. The first few days when there was no TV, it was like really terrible. It was a horrible time in our lives, basically, because they went from having screen fully to no screens. And then we had it where they had no screens like Monday to Friday at all. So the first few days were terrible. But after a few days, it was done. Like the TV was there, they never switched it on, they never went to it, nothing like that.
It's a very tough thing to do, but I think I always tell people to keep their kids away from 3 S's: screens, sugar, and school. Obviously, it's not practical for everyone, but that's what I think. I think like regulating what he eats in terms of sugar intake and his gut health and all that stuff. There's a lot of science and a lot of thing around boys' behaviors and their gut health and what they're eating and all this stuff.